If you are a DC Comics fan, then you know that it is almost impossible to escape Batman. He's everywhere. The quality to quantity ratio for Batman comics has not been great in recent years. Batman is DC's cash cow, and they're going to milk that cow for all it's worth. Because of this, week after week, month after month, and year after year, we get loads of Batman comics, and a good chunk of them are not deserving of even being published. But every once in a while, there will be a diamond in the rough that will remind you why Batman is one of the best characters in comic book history. And in 2021, that diamond is Batman the Imposter. This book is written by Mattson Tomlin, who also co-wrote the screenplay for the upcoming Batman movie, and the artist is Andrea Sorrentino, who is arguably the best in the industry right now and does a great job at bringing all this craziness to life. Also, shout out to Jordi Belair, who is the colorist on this book. Her colors are magnificent and add a lot to this book. She seriously elevates the art even more. It's so great. This book takes place outside of the main DC canon. In other words, this is an Elseworlds title. There are a lot of differences in this universe when comparing it to the Batman you know and love. This Batman and the world that surrounds him is much darker and more grounded. Now, I know almost every time there's a new interpretation of Batman in either the comics, the movies, the TV shows, whatever, you'll hear words like realistic and gritty and darker, but trust me when I say that this book is one of the more real world and dark looks of the character we have ever seen. Batman is obviously the main focus of the story, but there are 3 characters in total that you will get pretty familiar with. Those characters being Bruce himself, Leslie Tompkins, and a new character created specifically for this story, Detective Blair Wong. Before I go any further, I want to say that this book is fantastic. I love it. It's one of my favorite books of 2021, and I highly recommend you read it if you have not yet, because I'm going to be doing spoilers for this book. So do not do the disservice of yourself by letting this video ruin the story for you. If you can, go and read the comic first and then come back to this video, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because this story is amazing and you deserve to read it without knowing the spoilers first. Anyways, there's your spoiler warning, but also if you don't care about spoilers, you should still read the book, because I'm not going to be covering every little detail in this. There will be stuff I'm going to be skipping over, so just read the comic. Anyways, let's talk about the characters. Let's start off with Bruce, since he is the main character, and there are some differences here when comparing him to his in-canon counterpart. What sets this Bruce apart from most others we have seen is his rage. He's mad at the world for what happened to his parents, and he hasn't found any bit of peace. Obviously, every Batman in every universe is mad about what happened to their parents, but this one is to a more extreme extent. He's got some pretty big issues. A huge part of what makes this Bruce so fueled by rage is that he never had any help. In this reality, Alfred left and he's never had a Robin, so no one was there to help calm the rage. Bruce was even sent to military school in Russia when he was 11, so you can imagine how that would affect a little kid who lost their parents. So after Bruce's parents died, he never really felt love from anyone. Alfred saw him as an insane child that should be put on pills to sedate him. But once Bruce became too much to handle, Alfred abandoned him, and that obviously had a huge effect on Bruce. It's interesting to see that take here. Alfred is such a huge part of Bruce's life that often we don't think about what Bruce would be like without him. It's common in Elseworlds Superman stories for him to land somewhere else and be raised by someone other than the Kents, because the Kents shaped who he is. So how do you change Superman? You change to raise him. But with changing Batman, writers tend to not think like that. They tend to think of changing around Thomas and Martha Wayne, not Alfred. But if you really think about it, Alfred is the man that had the biggest hand in forming Bruce into the man he becomes. So you take Alfred away and you fundamentally change Batman. I would hate this if they did it in canon, but for an out of canon story, I love it and I find it very intriguing. Now that you know how Bruce is in this universe, let's move on to Detective Blair Wong, who probably gets the second most page time behind Bruce in this story. Blair is a detective for the GCPD who has been working the Batman case for the past 2 years. For context, this book takes place in year 3 of Bruce's career as the Caped Crusader. The GCPD is in a horrible spot right now because during year 1 of Batman's career, he worked with Jim Gordon, and they did a lot of good, but also a lot of damage because, again, this is a more grounded, realistic universe, so if you're working with a masked vigilante, it's kind of hard to get things done through the legal system. Batman Jim uncovered evidence that Gotham's 3 crime families had 5 judges on their payroll. The evidence overturned dozens of their cases. The judges never went to prison because Gordon was working with Batman, so Gordon got fired from the GCPD and run out of Gotham. That's yet another thing that led to how bitter this Bruce is. No Alfred, no Robin, and no Jim Gordon. Anyways, by working with the Batman, Jim made the GCPD look like a circus, and so the GCPD started investigating Batman, and they put Blair Wong on the case. Blair has a somewhat similar story to Bruce. Both of her parents were shot in front of her when she was a child, and when she grew up, she became a cop because her dad was a police officer. So she's a pretty tragic character, and her and Bruce get entwined into some things in the book, and there are some sad moments between them too, but also some great moments as well, and she is an integral part of this story that I came to really love, because in issue 1, I was kind of indifferent about her, but then issue 2 and 3, I really like Blair Wong. I thought she's a really interesting character, but issue 1, I'm like, give me Batman, and then I'm like, who's this detective girl, and then issue 2 and 3, I'm like, okay, she's actually really cool and helps flesh out this story a lot. The third and final main character in this book, because there's a lot of different characters, but like I said, the 3 main characters are Bruce, Blair Wong, and Leslie Tompkins. So Leslie is one of the few positive influences Bruce has in his life. When he was a child, he was put into therapy for obvious reasons, and Leslie was his therapist, and she helped him as much as she could. But by just being his therapist, she could only help so much. She's, not there in the day-to-day in his house, like actually able to help as if a parent or a parent-like figure could. In the modern day, after not so successful night out fighting crime, Bruce shows up at Leslie's place bleeding out. Leslie patches him up and tells him he needs to explain to her why he does what he does as Batman. Like, what the hell? She didn't know he was Batman. He just shows up bleeding out, dressed up as Batman. She's like, what? You need to explain right now. You need to explain some things. And she tells him that, or she will report him to the authorities. Leslie sees Bruce as a broken kid that mentally has not progressed much since that night in Crime Alley. She really feels sorry for him because she knows all the things he went through. She knows that Alfred abandoned him, and she's just like, she feels sorry for Bruce, but also at the same time, she sees kind of how insane he is. So, yeah, she's in a tough spot. Bruce explains that he dons the cape and cowl because Batman is actually making a difference in Gotham. He tells Leslie that Gotham had its first night without any violent crime in 54 years, and that was thanks to Batman. Leslie says she will keep Bruce's secret under one condition. Every morning at dawn, Bruce will come to her office and they will talk about what he is doing as Batman. If he doesn't show up, she will call the cops. Leslie desperately wants to save Bruce from himself, but she doesn't really know how, and this is sort of her best idea that she has. And we get some really interesting moments between Leslie and Bruce, because every issue we have Bruce show up to Leslie Tompkins' place all beat up and being like, okay, I did this, that, and the other thing. I beat up these guys. I was looking at this. I was going out and doing this stuff, and I helped with this thing. And Leslie's just like hearing all the insane things Bruce did. Bruce just acting like it's normal day-to-day stuff. And it's very intriguing. I really like this aspect of the book. And you see, like, from Leslie's POV of how she's like a normal person being like, man, this is absolutely insane. But then you also see from Bruce's perspective how he's actually helping people and how he got to where he is. Now that we got the 3 main characters covered, let's go a bit deeper into the story itself, because this book is called Batman the Imposter. So you want to know why is it called Batman the Imposter? Well, it's called that because someone has been dressing up as Batman and killing criminals. The first case of this happening was when Batman lined up 3 guys on a rooftop and kicked them off one by one. Little gruesome, and obviously that's not the real Batman, that's not Bruce Wayne. The 3 perps that were kicked off the roof were in Blackgate for murder charges, but were let out due to Batman and Gordon revealing the judge sentenced them did deals with the 3 big crime families. So because that judge got exposed by Batman and Gordon, any sentencing he had done got overturned because, well, this guy's corrupt, so we can't keep these people in prison. So these people that committed murder are now free because of what Batman did. But the imposter is cleaning up a mess that Batman helped create because, Batman did this stuff, these people got out, this Batman's coming out. It's like, yeah, I'm just going to basically finish these guys because this is a mess that Batman created. And up until now, the GCPD had kind of given Batman a pass since he had made their job easier. But now that he's executing criminals, the GCPD is going after him. They had Wong investigating him, trying to figure out what they could, but they weren't, like, actively hunting Batman. But now that he's killing people, like, executing them on rooftops, they're going around being, yeah, we're going to go after Batman. He's public enemy number 1 right now. Another character that plays a pretty significant role in this book is Ratcatcher. He's a very sad character in this book. Ratcatcher is essentially a social outcast that might be a little mentally slow. Not might be, he is a little mentally slow. And he's not Ratcatcher the villain that you know from like main DC. He's more of a sympathetic character here. He's this outcast. But the imposter Batman has befriended him to use his knowledge of Gotham's underbelly, because he's like the go-to sort of rat exterminator in Gotham. And so he gets to go places that other people don't, because they see, oh, it's that mentally slow guy. We can talk about whatever around him, and he's familiar with things in Gotham because he's been in Gotham his whole life. But because of this friendship with Batman, the police bring Ratcatcher in for questioning, but the real Batman captures Ratcatcher while the police are en route to bring him to the precinct. Now, the setup for this whole event that happens, also it looks so badass because Andrea Sorrentino's pencils are beautiful and the colors are fantastic, and it looks so good, just like the rest of this book. But let me give you the setup for what happens here, how we got to this point to where Batman's fighting the GCPD to get Ratcatcher for what he knows about the imposter Batman. So Blair Wong had been investigating Batman, and one of her leads was, Bruce Wayne might be funding Batman, or maybe he is Batman, who knows? Because obviously, if you're looking at who Batman is, Bruce Wayne is one of the people that would probably show up on your radar. So she goes to investigate Bruce Wayne. Bruce has a lot of ways of being like, I'm not Batman. She kind of believes him, but also he's got his charm, and he kind of falls in love with Blair Wong, and Blair Wong falls in love with him, and we get this like beautiful page of them kissing in the rain and stuff. But yeah, basically, during one of the therapy sessions, Bruce talks about how he fell in love for the first time ever with Blair Wong, because it's someone that's sort of a kindred spirit to him, because her parents were murdered in Gotham in front of her as well. So they have a connection. But like we know with this Bruce, he's very deranged, and Batman comes first before anything. So even though he's, in love with her, he also uses her. When he sleeps over at her place, he hacks her laptop and gets some GCPD files because he Batman and he needs to do Batman things. So when he learns about Ratcatcher and them getting Ratcatcher, he goes and he intercepts the GCPD vehicle that is transporting Ratcatcher, because they realize that Ratcatcher is, I just said Ratcatcher like 20 times. Anyways, when they grab Ratcatcher, they go and they're going to take him to the GCPD to interrogate him. So Batman is like, nah, not gonna let that happen. So Batman cuts the car off that Blair Wong is in, ends up beating the crap out of Blair Wong. The girl that he had just slept with and is in love with freaking kicks her in the stomach and sends her flying. And this like kind of gives Batman, or Bruce, PTSD for the rest of the book. This same shot of him kicking her like in the sternum is played throughout the book several times, because Bruce is like, damn, I'm in love with this girl and I just sent her flying. So it kind of affects Bruce because he's in love with this girl, but at the same time Batman comes before everything. So it's a big moment there when Bruce just decides to beat the crap out of the girl he loves because he decides his mission as Batman is more important. Anyways, he ends up getting Ratcatcher, catching Ratcatcher, if you will. Bruce takes Ratcatcher to his place. Ratcatcher is also known as Otis, so I will say Otis as well, so I don't have to say Ratcatcher 10,000 times like I've been saying. Anyways, he takes Ratcatcher, he starts interrogating him, and it's honestly very sad and heartbreaking. Ratcatcher sees Batman as his only friend, so when Batman starts brutalizing him for information, that destroys Otis. The poor guy, like when he met the imposter Batman, he's like, oh man, I see that this guy's doing good for Gotham, because Otis knows more than anyone how horrible of a place Gotham is and how horrible the people there are, and he sees Batman as a hero, and he's like, man, I can help this guy. And then Batman allows him to help him. Well, the imposter Batman does. So he's like, I finally have a friend. Everyone hates me and sees me as a weirdo that likes rats, but now I have a friend. And so when Batman starts beating the crap out of him for information, acting like he doesn't know him, because the real Batman, Bruce Wayne, does not know Otis. He's never interacted with him before. It's the imposter Batman. But Otis doesn't know that there's two different Batman. He thinks they're one and the same. So when Bruce starts interrogating him and he's like, don't you know who I am? Bruce is like, I don't know who the hell you are, and just starts beating the crap out of him. It's a very sad, heartbreaking moment in the book. The one person in Gotham who does not despise Otis is now torturing him and acts like he doesn't even know him. This is sad, but Bruce gets the information he needs and then drops Otis off at the GCPD. At the GCPD, we get another just incredibly heartbreaking moment where Ratcatcher ends up committing suicide because of how twisted everything went. And it's really like, I'm not even doing it justice telling you how things went down. If you read the book, it's one of the more sad things to happen in comics in recent memory. And it happened with Ratcatcher, a character I never cared about. But Master Tomlinson did a great job at portraying all this, and it's really sad. Due to some info that Bruce got from Otis, he ends up finding the imposter's hideout, and when he's there, he ends up having a fight with the imposter Batman. Bruce gets hurt really badly, and the police are hunting him while the imposter got away. So the police also got that information from Otis, and they go into the sewers. And so Bruce and the imposter have a fight. Bruce gets hurt, the bad end of that fight. The imposter gets away, and Bruce ends up getting hunted by the police. Bruce is able to escape as well, but Detective Wong cuts him off because she's been studying Batman this whole time, and she realized he has this network of zip lines all throughout like the high rises in Gotham. And so she figures out, okay, Batman was headed this way, I'll be able to cut him off here. So she does that. She even shoots him, and then Batman unmasks, and Wong sees it's Bruce, and she's in disbelief that her lover is Batman, because as much as Bruce loves her, she loves him as well. This ain't a one-way thing. They both have a big connection with each other and love each other. Bruce tells her Batman does not kill people, and that there's someone pretending to be him. Wong keeps yelling at him that he is under arrest, but Bruce says to her, either put me down or let me go. There is no other option. Wong isn't able to pull the trigger and lets Bruce go. This is a very interesting difference between Bruce and Wong here, because they have similar paths. They both had their parents murdered in front of them in Gotham. They both got driven to do things to try to bring bad people to justice. But earlier, when Bruce had to go through Wong to get what he wanted for his mission as Batman, he didn't even hesitate. But when Wong has to go through Bruce to get what justice for her mission, she lets him go. She can't pull the trigger. It's very interesting there, seeing the difference between Bruce and Wong, and I love that. I thought it was a really cool part of the book, because as much as their paths are similar, they are two totally, completely different people. Bruce then goes to Leslie Tompkins. He tells her that therapy is over, because he's been through a lot in this book, and he's like, I'm freaking done with therapy. I have to take out this Batman. And he's like, you know Batman is making a difference. He's like, you know, Leslie, that my work as Batman's making a difference. Leslie pulls out the argument that every brain-dead person on Twitter does, which is, why not just donate your money? That would help more people than Batman. Bruce explains that per the terms of his parents' estate, he receives $1 million annually until he's 30. He says if he could give away all the billions the Waynes have, he would, but he can't. And also, this book repeats the narrative that Batman is making a difference that money never could. Like earlier when it talked about how they had the first nonviolent crime night in 54 years in Gotham, that was thanks to Batman. No amount of billions could have stopped that. But also Bruce is like, yeah, I don't care about money. I only use the money to fund what I can do. I don't care about actually having money. I would give it all away if I could, but I can't. But I thought that was great that Matt Tomlin directly addressed the people on Twitter that are like, why doesn't Batman just give all his money away? I thought he did really great there, and I love Bruce just being like, yeah, of course I would if I could, but I can't. And also, Batman is clearly making a difference that money couldn't. Anyways, after this, events lead to Bruce and Wong being ambushed by the Imposter Bat. Just a lot of things happen. I'm not going to talk about. Read the book. And it leads to Bruce and Wong having an interaction. Well, when he's dressed as Batman. Batman and Wong having an interaction. And then the Imposter Bat shows up. It's an epic final showdown where the Imposter explains that all of this is Batman's fault. Saying this all happened because you want to play dress up and break a broken system even worse. He tells Batman he's cleaning up his mess by killing all the criminals that got convictions overturned because the Batman was involved. Batman ends up defeating the Imposter Bat, and it is revealed that the Imposter Bat is Hatcher, who is a detective, well, another guy on the GCPD that I haven't talked about, because again, I'm not going to go over every little thing in this book. You should definitely read it. This is just me telling you it's amazing and you should read it. So this reveal means nothing to you if you just watched this video and didn't read the comic, but it's a pretty cool reveal and it's done really well. Anyways, Hatcher voluntarily falls to his death like a Disney villain, seeing that as a better option than going to prison. Wong cuffs Bruce and puts him under arrest, but Bruce asks for one simple question. Do you think Gotham will be better off without me? She sees that Bruce is right and lets him go. In the ending monologue from Leslie Tompkins, we see that the imposter had a huge impact on Gotham's view of Batman. The people of Gotham don't agree on whether there was an imposter or not. If there was, who was he? What does Batman really stand for? The imposter ruined Batman's already not so great reputation, but the book does end on a happier note. We see that the ventriloquist goes to Leslie Tompkins for therapy after recommendation from Bruce Wayne, or Batman. This is another thing I didn't cover earlier, but earlier in the book, there's this big tech guy that his son is the ventriloquist, and the ventriloquist is very messed up. He hasn't done anything bad yet, but he basically pleads to Batman, please kill my dad because he's an abusive asshole. And Bruce kind of just like is whatever and just keeps going. But at the end of the book, he ends up recommending him to therapy for Leslie Tompkins. So that's another interesting part of this Elseworlds, because in this universe, it's implied that the ventriloquist never actually becomes a bad guy because he goes to therapy with Leslie Tompkins because of Bruce Wayne. So that's pretty interesting. this little part at the end with the ventriloquist going to therapy because of a recommendation from Batman shows that Bruce is evolving, because Bruce earlier in the book probably would have just brutalized him, but now Bruce is kind of on a different path and realizing some of the wrongs he's done and realizing that there are people out there that care about him. And yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool part of the book. Another happier part of the book is at the end we see that Otis Flanagan, aka Ratcatcher, was buried next to the Waynes. Well, in the same cemetery as the Waynes, which obviously, knowing his stature in Gotham, he wouldn't actually have that happen if it weren't for Bruce pulling some strings, and also Bruce visits his gravestone, which is nice. So a little bit of happiness for Otis Flanagan post-mortem, which is something. But overall, this is obviously a dark book. Bruce finally found someone he connected with on a personal level, someone he even loved in Detective Wong, but he had to hurt her in order to do what was needed as Batman. He brutalized Ratcatcher, causing him to commit suicide. Gotham doesn't exactly trust Batman at all. It's a pretty dark book, but overall I did like it, and I thought it was a cool new take on Batman, and I think it's something that everyone should read if you're a fan of Batman at all. If you like comics and you like Batman, check it out. It's a great book, and it's so beautiful. I think the story's great, but even if you don't like the story, just look at it. It is a beautiful book, and I highly recommend it. It's so good, and this was one of my favorite comics of 2021. I thought it was a great book. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've read this book. What do you think of Batman the Imposter? And if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like, leave a comment for the algorithm, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you later.